Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum planning for 2021. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. So we spent a lot of 2020 discussing the implications of an impending move by Ethereum in January and in Q1. If you look at a lot of prior years for Ethereum, the move can extend well into the summer. However, we also do not want to turn a blind eye to other pieces of data that could suggest that at some point in 2021, Ethereum could calm down for a bit. And is that necessarily the worst thing in the world? I don't think so. I think that it gives people a time to accumulate, to adjust to the new normal, the new paradigm shift. So in this video, we're going to go through systematically what I am talking about. So the first chart just shows our 90-day ROI discretized by every single prior month and each year. And what you'll notice just on a first glance is that, again, the white line represents 1. 10 to the 0 is 1. This is a logarithmic scale. 10 to the 1 is 10x. And so anything above the white line here represents that you're seeing a 90-day ROI where you're at least improving upon your initial investment, not including inflation, of course, and maybe not including gas fees, if that is a part of the transaction. But regardless, you may notice that it seems like there's a little bit of a lull in the middle of the year. Okay, so look at this chart. It seems like there's major moves or 90-day ROIs that are pretty good on either end. But a lot of times in the middle of the year, there seems to be a bit of a lull. So what can we do to better understand what the implications of that are and how does it affect things? Well, in my opinion, the best path, right? Just focus on the long-term goal. There's nothing wrong with taking some profits along the way. You have to live life. Nothing wrong with taking some risk off the table. But let's focus on the long haul here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to average out each month based on the month of the year. Okay, so whether it's January of every single year, February of every single year, March of every single year, etc. What happens when you do that? Well, when you do that, this is what you get. You get the average 90-day ROI of Ethereum discretized just by month and averaged over that month for every year of existence. And what do you see? You see the average ROI over 90 days. I mean, there's a lot of months where it's well above 1. I mean, these are not rookie numbers here. Right? You're talking about an average 90-day ROI in January that approaches 3x. And in February, that's around 2.5, and March around 2.5 or so. So these are not rookie numbers by any means. But what also do you notice, right? We're not going to turn a blind eye to the data on this channel. Again, we're not just here to say things will go up forever, because they won't. But what you will notice is that as you get later into the year, as you get into April, it starts to come down a little bit, and May, it starts to come down. Now, on average, they're still above 1, which is incredible, right? I mean, that's incredible in and of itself, that they're still on average above 1 when averaged out over that month for every single year of existence. However, the summer, and we said this last year too, the summer, historically speaking, is generally not the best time to buy Ethereum. If you're only looking at your 90-day ROI. Now, if you're looking at, say, your 4-year ROI, then you would be hard pressed to find a time where it wouldn't have been good to buy Ethereum, because even if you bought Ethereum a little over 3 years ago at the peak in 2018, you would still be up almost 2x today. So this again is looking at your 90-day ROI. Now, again, this channel is focused on the macro scale, but I also realize that people can feel a certain way if they invest in something and it sort of sits still for a while. And so hopefully this data can at least manage your expectations. So in the summer, the 90-day ROI does not tend to be the best. Why is that? Why does it not tend to be the best? Well, it's funny because it's sort of counterintuitive, but a lot of times you'll have these major moves by Ethereum that can sort of have a local, maybe a local top somewhere in the summer, or that's when things can start to cool down for a while. And it doesn't necessarily imply that it's having a major retracement. It could just imply that it's just cooling down for a while and gearing up for whatever the next move is later on. Because if you look at the average 90-day ROI for June, July, and August, it's basically around 1, which means if you buy in June and then sold in September, you're generally not going to see that great of an ROI, because it would be around 1 if you bought in July and sold in October, or August and sold in November. This is averaged out. Now, of course, the standard deviations on these are going to be quite high, because every single year Ethereum, I mean, the ROI has deviated a lot. But regardless, what it shows you is that historically speaking, during the middle of the year, there tends to be a lull in the valuation of Ethereum in terms of it continuing to step up the ladder. And it makes sense. I mean, Ethereum's been going up for a long time now, and we've seen it sort of lull before and not make any major moves for a few months. And then it makes the months where it is moving significantly even more exciting. So we recognize right now that we're in a very, very bullish time, and that the price of Ethereum is just going up very quickly, and a lot of us are very happy about that. But let's also take a look at the coming months and realize that this summer, when making an investment in Ethereum in the summer, historically speaking, based on the data, does not necessarily give you the best short-term ROI. Long-term is a different story, right? Again, as I said, if you're looking at, say, your 3-year ROI with Ethereum, you would be hard-pressed not to find a time frame where you would be doing quite well, especially if you look at, say, like a 3.5-year ROI or a 4-year ROI. So with that said, we want to segue over to the chart of Ethereum. And this is something that we covered in 2019 extensively, we covered in 2020 extensively, and we want to cover it extensively in 2021 so that you can have these expectations as we navigate through the entire year. So if you've been following the channel for a while, this is not news to you. This is just more of the same information. But what we'll notice is that in Q4, and by the way, this is the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. This is not the Ethereum USD valuation. What we just showed was Ethereum USD ROI. This is Ethereum Bitcoin. What I want to show you is that a lot of times in Q4, the Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin bleeds, okay? And a lot of times too, that's why the ROI buying in, say, like the late summer can often not be that great, because Ethereum tends to be bleeding against Bitcoin. Now, it can be doing okay against USD, but if it's constantly bleeding against Bitcoin, you'd probably rather be in Bitcoin at that time anyways. But again, a Q4 bleed and a Q4 bleed. Let's keep going through each year, right? Each year, a Q4 bleed. And then we're going to go to the following year. A Q4 bleed. Let's keep going. We're not going to leave any stone unturned here. Another Q4 bleed. And then finally, you guys were obviously aware of this one if you're following the channel, because we talked about this one very, very recently. We were also very, we covered this one as well extensively, but my channel was a lot smaller back then. I didn't even have 10,000 subscribers back in 2019. So actually I hit 10,000 on December 31st of 2019. So back over here, I imagine most people don't remember those conversations, but these conversations are probably a little bit more in your mind. So what we notice when we look at the macro scale for Ethereum is that we see 6 years, we see Q4 every single year, and we see that the Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin tends to bleed in Q4. Now, sometimes it bleeds in Q4 because Bitcoin is going up, and it's going up very quickly, and it's doing this new paradigm shift type thing, and that's why it bleeds. Other times it'll bleed because Bitcoin's bleeding and below the 20-week, and then Ethereum's going to bleed even more. So those are the very bearish times when Bitcoin's bleeding in Q4, because then a lot of times Ethereum's bleeding even harder than Bitcoin's bleeding. So we want to take a closer look at this chart. What do you notice though? In January, that's when you tend to see these major moves. Okay, this was January, and it lasted until February. We had another move up in May. that was slightly less than what we saw in February, January and February, but still it was still doing quite well. And it wasn't until the summer that you started to see a lull in the valuation, and then it led into a Q4 bleed against Bitcoin. And then if you go again to the following year, you can see that in January, Ethereum's valuation against Bitcoin was doing very well, and through March, and it even continued on until June. Okay, it continued on until June. But then at some point in June, it started to pull back, and it continued to pull back even throughout all of Q4. Okay, so again, we continue on. What happened the following year? Well, it made a major move in January, but then we hit the end of the bull market, and then it just continued to bleed for a very long time. Even in the bear market, we saw an Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin. We saw a nice little pump here at the very end of the year, early January as well, about 50-something% against Bitcoin. And then we'll continue on, and we remember the 2020 move. It was about a 60% move against Bitcoin, and then in 2020 to 2021, so far, we put in about 103% through February, but we've continued on even into April. But it might be hard for some people to fully appreciate the valuation in terms of Bitcoin, because maybe they only think about it in terms of the US dollar. And so this is another way we can look at it. Okay, so this is the valuation of Ethereum against US dollar. You can see a bleed in Q4, a major move up in Q1, and then in the summer, it was a fairly down time, and it wasn't even going up, it wasn't going down, but the 90-day ROI from buying over here wasn't that great, because in Q4 it actually bled. Okay, so the ROI wasn't that great, because on average in Q4 we saw a bleed. But then in January, again, it went up again, and it stopped, it sort of leveled out around the summer, so around June. And I mean, it might not look like much. This might not look like much, but this was a modest, almost 70% drop. So I mean, I'm sure that would turn a few heads. But regardless, when you zoom out, you can see that in the summer, so starting in June, the valuation of Ethereum really calmed down for a while and didn't really start picking back up until December, and even late November and into December, and then even going into January. But it was again in the summer that the valuation of Ethereum really started to calm down some after a major move. Okay, this was our bear market. Okay, and then the bear market, it was just more or less down the entire time. We still had a move up in April, but as we went into the summer, we continued to just drop like a rock, and even going into Q4. So this was our bear market, and was just basically down the entire time. Okay, so then we go into 2019, and yet again we had a nice move that ended. This nice move here, it ended in the summer, and then going into these the second half of the year, you can see that it started to go back down. But then what do you notice again? In January, it moved back up. We had the pandemic capitulation. We continued to move up, and then what do you notice? By the late summer, we started. So we did go up. We did go up even in July. I mean, I don't know that it was necessarily anything to write home about. I mean, it went up a small amount, right? I mean, from late July, it still was able to go up 77%. I'm not really sure who gets out of bed for a 77% move by Ethereum, but it did go up, and then it more or less just traded sideways until November. I mean, and we didn't break this wick over here until late November. So again, another time when we saw it cool down in the middle of the year after a fairly impressive move. We always look back at 2020 and think that since March it just went up constantly, but there was actually a period, you can see here, from late July out until November, that it wasn't really doing a whole lot, and the market got relatively quiet, and that's when Bitcoin was really making its own move. Okay, so we look at the chart today and we say, well, what did we get? We continue to get this move in the first quarter of the year, and it's going into the second quarter of the year. We're getting close to May. Okay, we're approaching May and June. So my guess, and again, dubious speculation is something that we do sometimes do here. Obviously, I think predicting exact prices in the short term is very hard to do, but remember, we can talk about these trends and recognize that historically speaking in the summer, we have seen things slow down some for Ethereum. That doesn't detract from Ethereum in any way. it's just, to some degree, it's just Ethereum getting accustomed to whatever the new normal is. There can be some volatility, but I do want people to be potentially prepared for the implication of that. Now, of course, Ethereum could throw us a curveball and completely change the game this summer and say, you know, to hell with prior data, we're going to do something completely different. But imagine a world where Ethereum continues to go up for several more weeks and we get into the summer, June, July. In my opinion, is it going to be that big of a deal if we see some type of cool down period? Remember, the last cycle had several cool down periods, okay? It had a move up, a modest 3,000%, followed by a time where we more or less did nothing for about a year. And then after that, we moved up from the bottom here, another 5,000% or so, followed by yet another time frame where we moved sideways for half a year. And then we finally moved up again, going into the final phase of the bull market. So the reason we do this video is so that people are aware that these types of phases in the markets can exist, they do exist, they have existed, and it should not take away from what Ethereum has accomplished, and it does not take away, in my opinion, from where Ethereum is headed. But as we go into 2021, we need to, or as we continue into 2021, we're already in 2021, as we continue into 2021, we need to be prepared for the implication of maybe a lull in the summer, if history is any indication, and we continue to have an adjustment period where we really try to get used to whatever the new normal is. And right now we're sort of racing to whatever that new normal is, and then at some point we're going to have to adjust to it. And there can be some volatility in the short term. Remember, it looks like this is mostly just sideways movement, but this was a 70% drop almost, followed by an immediate move back up to the upside that essentially took us right back to where we were. So it can get somewhat scary. I will give you that, but we need to just be prepared for the coming months. Now, if you look at the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, one thing that I'm sort of looking at is, you know, is it going to do this thing where it goes back up to the top of the channel? And if it goes back up to the top of the channel in April or May, and we are unable to break it, and we come back down, I would sort of hope that maybe we can get a move back up to the top of the channel before our historical and 6 times proven bleed of the Ether Bitcoin valuation in Q4, followed by a December capitulation and maybe another move up in early 2022. So I simply do not yet know how this is going to play out. But again, I think that it's more important how you react to things, not necessarily trying to predict exactly what happens. You know, whatever I think might happen in the short term has no bearing on the trades I make for Ethereum, because again, this is not a day trading game. And another thing we have to consider is, you know, we could always come above this channel, have a major blow off top, and then a lull for a while we really get accustomed to the new normal, and it could look something like that. So we don't want to discount that either. Hopefully this video is informative. If you like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's go for 340,000 subscribers. Thank you guys for getting me to a third of a million. Give the video a thumbs up. Also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. And remember, we have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com. You can sign up for that. If you want to get access to weekly reports and videos, the Telegram alerts channel, the Telegram chat room, the risk dashboard, the Into the Cryptoverse app, the first Into the Cryptoverse NFT coming very, very soon. We're going to be collecting addresses for that for, I would say, at least a few more days. So make sure you guys sign up if you want to get access to all that stuff. I hope this video was informative. We also have some t-shirts for sale. You can find that in the description below as well if that interests you. But regardless, make sure you guys subscribe. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Bye.